Buddhism is one of the great religions of the world. I should start by saying welcome to another podcast. What is Buddhism? Well, I'm going to endeavour to tell you what Buddhism is. Buddhism is sometimes quite difficult to understand and to relate to. Partly because in the Western world, and which I include America, South America, we are tuned into Christianity. So Buddhism is a faith that began and arose in the East, in an area in northern India. If you're familiar with that part of the world, relate to Pakistan today, India, Nepal, and then that was the basic area within which Buddhism arose. And the word Buddhism it's important to understand what it was, and it means to be awake or to be aware. Awoke, awake, aware. Aware and awake have the same root. Awoke, awake. And by awake, they mean to be free and to be conscious of the world within which we live in terms of the material world, and the way we become bound and enslaved to the world around us. So to be awake means to be aware that you yourself and myself, we are more and beyond the material world around us. It's so easy to enslave ourselves to activities, to objects, to material wealth in the world, and to ignore the wealth of our spiritual side, our being. When I say being, I'm going to talk about, include the word self, okay? And then the I-ness of you is your conception of who you are. The way you choose clothes, the way you choose friends, the way you choose material possessions, everything that you have in the material world is attached to identity of the I-ness. So I am, so talking about the I-ness is your material. So going back, Buddhism, when it says to be aware, it means to be aware that the world has suffering in it, that the material world is impermanent, and as a being, Buddhism teaches a way to let go of a lot of the suffering, or as much as you are able to, in the material world, in order to get back to a truer sense of who you really are, the withinness, which they often talk about being the primordial being, your inner true self. So Buddhism talks about ways of blowing out the arising, to preventing the arising of material activities and events and thought processes in your mind. Buddhism talks about ways to let go of problems in our lives, to accept them and let them go, and not to create new problems for ourselves, and to perhaps maybe escape the endless cycle of the pattern of happiness and then sadness and then trauma and then the thing. It seeks to break the wheel. So if you're you'll behave like a gerbil or a hamster and going round and round and round on the proverbial wheel. It's the Buddhism about how to jump off this wheel in order to enter a stream of being, a way of being which is not bound by the material world. And first, you need to be aware and awake that there is suffering in the world. Then you need to look at realize that you are more than the physical world that you inhabit or that we inhabit. By physical material world, I literally mean, say, a clock, keys, even my green tea from Argentina. They call it mate. The mirror, and everything else you want to include around you that could be material, even maybe incense or your chair you're sitting on. So Buddhism then looks at how these problems are arising, how they arise, the chain, the causal connection of how these temporary objects come, and then we dependency on something, and then it dissipates and evaporates. It's called phenomenal existence. Or do you know the word ephemeral? Ephemeral means something that's passing, that's fleeting. Imagine a cloud. You see the cloud as a formation, but eventually the cloud will dissipate into clean air. It will not. Clouds evaporate. So Buddhism goes on at quite some length to try to communicate to people interested in these ideas, the idea that the world is temporary, it's ephemeral, it's fleeting, it's an illusion. And then when you are aware of the basics of how we become caught up and trapped up in relationships, in material possessions, in wanting something better all the time, then in the process we can actually lose that centeredness of who we are and dislocate and become detached from our true being. A kind of mild psychosis. And these 4 points I've illustrated then is to get on to the way, and Buddhism shows a way to free yourself. So when we talk about Buddhism, we're talking about the word meaning literally to be awake and aware. And the 4 things I've described to you is what one calls the 4 noble truths. I've just mentioned them to you. Perhaps you're aware of that. But one is, the first noble truth is dukkha, which means suffering. There is suffering in the world. Dukkha or dukkha. And the second is anatman. And anatman is another great sounding Sanskrit word, which means that your self is not in the material world around you. You're not defined. Although I have a black top on, I have a zip, I have a ring with black coral in it, and a watch, I'm not defined by these physical objects. If I was naked, I would be without the material world. So they call that anatman. The third is arudaya, which means looking at the way things arise in our lives and come and go, and how suffering and problems where they begin and how they arise. It looks at reasoning with and being aware. And the 4th one is nirvana or magga. You can go with either way, but nirvana is to do with blowing out, letting go of these problems in our lives, letting them go, turning off the switch. So you're turning off negative energy and you're turning it into positive energy, or you're just switching off things that are going on and repeating in one's life that cause damage and destruction to ourselves. So we need to be aware. So then Buddhism prescribes a way forward, and it's called the Eightfold Path. I can't quite remember the Sanskrit now, but it's the Arya Ashtanga Marga. Arya means virtuous or noble. Ashtanga means 8 parts. Marga is way. It's the Eightfold Path. So if you're able to look in Buddhism, the 4 noble truths, your mobile, the 4 noble truths, and then look at the Eightfold Path. So the word will return. The word Buddhism means to be awake. Awake to the world, awakeful to the pitfalls, awake to your own vulnerabilities, awake to how problems arise, and then ways to turn off the problem, ways to let go of negative energy. And then in doing so, you will become lighter and lighter, and you'll become more assimilated into the path of becoming free, happier, freer, enlightened. And if you can reach that level, that they call them jhana, then you can become a Buddhist yourself. You can become a Buddha. To be Buddhist doesn't mean that you are a Buddha, because a Buddha, I'll be careful here, but a Buddha tends to mean that you are enlightened. So the word Buddhism is a Sanskrit word. So for example, you have the French language, the German language, the English language, you have Nepalese language, you have Tibetan language. Sanskrit is a language, but it's an old language, and it is a classical language, and it's the language of the region that Buddhism arose in, was born into. And so it's not spoken today generally, but the Sanskrit words are used today because the old literature and the old concepts and ideas come from the old Sanskrit, which was the language which was in existence at that general time in the northern area of India. So a lot of Buddhist ideas and concepts are talked about in terms of the original word. The word karma, which you may have heard of, is a Sanskrit word. The word chakra, if you've heard of it, is a Sanskrit term. Dharma, karma, Buddhism. You see, you get the idea. So you often hear these Sanskrit words. If you like words, if you like language, I would encourage you right now to learn a few of these Sanskrit terms because they're fascinating. They have a resonance. Think of them as like keys to your mind, keys to your freedom. You can use them as tools. And so I do know quite a few Sanskrit terms because I enjoy talking about them. There is another language and terms which are a weakened form of Sanskrit basically, called Pali. Pali is a branch of this old language, if you like, and it is, well, let's just say, different. So if you know anything about, or you happen to be aware of the Hinayana Buddhism, a type of Buddhism, sometimes called Theravada, they use this language called Pali Canon. So let me explain. So if you happen to know, and you've read about Buddhism, and you know a bit about Hinayana, then they use this Pali language. So for example, the word Dharma in Sanskrit, in Pali, is Dhamma. Dhamma, they'll drop the R. And if you have the word chakra with the H, and the Ra, chakra, they call it Chaka. Kaka, I'm sorry. If you have it karma, drop the R, called Kama. And if you talk the word, could go on and on and on. So basically, Theravada and Hinayana Buddhism use this, the terms that I've been talking about, tend to use this Pali language, which is, I find, is weaker. I find doesn't sound as nice. It has no resonance the same way. I see it as perhaps a kind of weakened, diluted form of this beautiful Sanskrit language. Now you might say that I am right-wing if you know anything about, Sanskrit and Buddhism at all. Then you may say, oh, you don't like Pali. No, I personally love the resonance and the sound and the phonetics of Sanskrit. So Buddhism has, the birds just landed on this roof where I am. So Buddhism, a lot of the terms there use these Sanskrit words like karma, chakra, dharma, dukkha. I'm not sure whether you can hear the feet, the way of the birds are crossing. Buddhism. So, Buddhism, as I've explained to you, is a great religion, faith, and it means to be awake and aware. And they have the Four Noble Truths, which I've mentioned to you. You could repeat. I'm not going to give it too easy. Dukkha. Do you remember what I said that dukkha meant? Anatman. Do you remember what I said about anatman? Anatman. Arudaya. Then we have Nirodha or Nirvana. Nirodha. I'm going to name it Nirodha. Means to blow out the problems, to let go of the problems, to... I always like this illusion, you're sitting beside a river and you have a problem. Say these keys were a problem. Sitting beside a river that has a current, okay? And this floats. So you let go of something in the river, and the river will take it away. Such is the flow of our lives and energy. We're able to release and let go of things and just let time and place and being, just let them fall away. Imagine yourself as a tree and you have branches. Well, often as a tree will start small and will grow, there will be branches. Grow with branches. And for the tree to grow tall, often as the tree is growing, branches will have to break off and fall away. In the process, the tree continues to grow to be tall, and with the higher branches out, often the process, branches will have to let go and fall away. Now, if you're able to imagine these branches falling away from your life, let them go, let them fall away. Don't engage the problem. Don't just let it go. Don't become involved in the problem. Just become indifferent to the problem. Even if you want, ignore the problem. So Buddhism has these four noble truths, and the fourth one I just mentioned is nirodha, which means to blow out, literally to blow out the candle, to blow out, let the problem go, to turn off the light, to switch off problems as they come and go. And then after the four noble truths, then Buddhism now has the eightfold path. The eightfold path is 8 steps, 8 points. Some people call them rights. Righteous this, righteous that, but I don't. Righteous this, righteous, wrong, right, wrong. Buddhism isn't about wrong, right, right, you know. It's about a corrected, an adapted, a good way, a good thing. So the eightfold path, including these 8 precepts, these 8 ideas that are going to help us to let go of problems, to become less involved with the world, to become happier, healthier, and better. And more awake, more illuminated, less confused, less troubled, less worried. So for example, I'll give you one. One will be corrected action. What they will often, you often see is right action. Just was one of the 8. So right action, they call it samyak karma. Samyak karma meaning action, and samyak karma, very close to that. Maybe in a year I'll be able to roll them off instantly. But one of them is about right action, and right action is how to do the right thing at the right time, what action to do. Sometimes you could say it's better to do nothing and to do no action. And just like I said, like you dropping the problem in the river, you let go of the problem and you let the universe take that problem away from you by not engaging in the problem again, letting the problem go, not repeating the same and going round in this vicious cycle. Just let it go. Send to yourself. Trust yourself. Trust the universe. Right action might often be not taking any action, inaction. And this is called, in Taoism, they call it Wu Wei, which is actionless action. So by the fact of not acting, you're doing something. By doing nothing, you are acting. They call it Wu Wei, which means actionless action. So by not doing something, there's an act in itself. The act is being calm and staying calm, the act of being calm. So that there is eightfold paths, and I will not going to consume 20 minutes of this podcast going through the 8, what are the 8 points in this path, the 8 rules, the 8 guides to help one to awake, help you and me and us to become awake and enlightened, and either on the road of being half a Buddha, an arahat, or an arahant, or a wise person, or happier, better person, or even to go the whole way and become a Buddha. I better just roll them off to you otherwise, but you have right thought, right view, right action, the one I did mention. You have right life, right livelihood, right contemplation, right meditation, and right letting go, right resolve, which means the way you actually adjust them all, right resolve. Those are the eightfold path. Each one, one could talk about, I could talk to you about for, half an hour. So Buddhism, they talk about bhavana, and this is another Sanskrit term, and bhavana means becoming, what you become, how you become, what you become. And they would have a bhavana. You may have heard of the symbol, the wheel of life. Have you heard of that? The Buddhist diagram, the wheel of life. Call it the bhava chakra. Why bhava chakra? Chakra is wheel. The wheel of becoming. So bhavana is what we become in the process of our understanding and awakening to become a fully enlightened and a happier and better person. Bhavana. Some other key Sanskrit words that you'll come across, and they're all really interesting. You may come across the word prajna, which means wisdom. Prajna, wisdom, understanding. Prana means breath, but prajna means breath and a universal wisdom. Prajna. Another word that you may have probably heard of, karma, means what you sow, you will reap. You can have good karma and bad karma. So stealing would be bad karma. You create a negative event in your subconscious and your conscious. It will affect you, or your whole manifest throughout your body. Generosity, on negatives, maybe if you have like stealing, lying, deceiving, being ungenerous, being unkind, being violent. We could say becoming, drugs and alcohol in excess. You're gonna, always being bitter, refusing to trust yourself, refusing to love yourself, refusing to allow yourself to be and be true to who you are, and to fulfill your universal role in the universe. All these things are called negative karma. They create waves and patterns and chemical reactions in your mind and energy fields in your mind which are negative. Now good karma would be generosity, patience, not stealing, not being violent. And these good karma generates good chemical reactions in your body. It creates good energy waves and allows you to communicate with the universe on the good. Assuming you don't want to be a bad person and connect to the dark of the universe. In Christianity, you would maybe call that devil worship, or in paganism, then you would talk about that of the negative, dark, evil side. But assuming you want to be good, we're trying to tune in and become powerful with the good forces of the universe. So Buddhism is about trying to awaken and become aware and to free yourself from the materialness of the world and to reach an awakened, enlightened, and then transcendent state of being. Do Buddhists believe in God? Well, in a way, does Buddhism believe that there is more to the world than what we see, that our lives continue beyond our present state of being? You might be surprised to know that they do. It does. And I used to query this and go, well, do Buddhists believe in anything beyond themselves, or God? Or do they believe that there is a continuation beyond this life? And I always said, well, no, Buddhism doesn't believe in God. Buddhism doesn't believe in anything beyond this life. Well, I was wrong. So let's address these topics in the idea of reincarnation in Buddhism. The idea of, let me just go with this, the idea of reincarnation and rebirth and cycle, this other area now. Moving to another part of this thing. So Buddhism believes in samsara, and samsara is a perpetual cycle of existence. By samsara, it can continue on beyond this life. So Buddhism believes in reincarnation, and if you don't believe what I'm saying, just look at or type in the wheel of life. Now, we can be born into the animal realm, reborn. We can be reborn into the hungry ghosts realm, like it's a realm below being an animal level, and we can be born into a hell realm. Or we can be built into a semi-divine level called the asuras, and we can then be born into a godly realm called the realm of the devas. But the difference is that in Buddhism, the godly realm is considered less important than the human level, because the gods are trapped within their state of godliness, but they don't ever transcend that realm. Whereas the human realm, you can have the keys with Buddhism and teachings to, and also in Hinduism and Jainism, to be able to transcend this concept of the gods. The gods are seen as maybe the Greek titans, people or levels of spirit that kind of interfere, but not, for example, say like the Christian Elohim and Jehovah, or Thor, Hercules, or Zeus, or anything. Not a god in that sense, but Buddhism has a god realm. They believe there is a god realm. They believe there is an animal realm, a god realm, a hungry ghostly kind of level, and then below that a hellish kind of realm. They call it the hot and cold hell realm. So there are 6 main realms, but the human level is the most important of these, because we can either have good karma and transcend and go up and liberate our being, or we can descend down into the dark and we get caught by hatred, greed, illusion, and that can drag us down, so that we're born in a lower level. So very much what we do and how we act and who we behave and how we behave, and the gift of our life and what we do with our life will determine whether we're reborn, if we are unable to escape this samsara cycle in this life. So Buddhism is about us trying to awaken up to who we are, become enlightened while we have this opportunity of life. So samsara is the word of endless cycle of life and death, becoming enslaved. And to be free of that, I'll give you another Sanskrit term, easy word, call it moksha. And moksha is to be free. and following the Buddhist Eightfold Path and Buddhist ideas additional to the Eightfold Path, you may well be able to find this freedom from the endless cycles of existence. They call this moksha. There's another term which they use which is called kaivalya, which means to be independent of problems, free, liberated. So moksha, samsara, bhavana, the way that Buddha talks about this. Now, the term moksha and also the other thing is dharma. Dharma means the universal ordered rhythms of the universe, which he writes down, including plants growing and dying. It means, the way the moon goes the earth, and the sun and the moon, the earth and the moon go round the sun, and the cosmic galaxies go round in a natural order. This is called dharma. And little individual activities, you may do, such as, drinking this tea, or, lighting this lighter. Light? Yeah. Okay, little things like that called dharmas. They're called dharmas in Pali, dhammas. And dhammas means little ways we interact with this universal dharma. So dharma is a great thing. And Hinduism is called santama dharma, which means working with the universal order of the universal order. Full stop. So this idea of imagine a great wheel, the Dharma chakra, the cycle and the order of the universe, which we're all part of. I'm going to now talk about the idea, which sometimes is quite tricky, is the idea of whether Buddhists believe in self, in that there is a being, that there is a you, that there is an I. Most scholars believe, and I do, that yes, anatman doesn't mean you have no soul, but it means that your being is not defined by the material world around you. An is a negative, a negation, and atman means your being. But by being we mean not your being just in your body, but your transcendent being, what is traditionally called the soul. So if you hear the word atman, if you're able to mentally, I would encourage you to think of atman as soul. A soul can be here, but also soul transcends the life that we have, that we are around. Remember, if you don't believe that Buddhism talks about continuation after this life, then look at the great beautiful diagram, the great wheel called the Wheel of Life. Wheel of Life. You'll find it on your phone, and look at the realms. They're very much is that this is about we get born in different realms. So if we're able to be reborn, according to Buddhist scripture, what Buddhism speaks about, then we have to be reborn somewhere, and to be able to be reborn means that we have been reborn, i.e. there is a life beyond where we're reborn, otherwise we could not be reborn. So the other term is this idea of going back to anatman. It's a key term. Anatman means that an means not. Like you say, like sociable, unsociable. Un is the negation of sociable, yeah? Tolerant. You go intolerant. In is another negation. A negation negates tolerant. Tolerant, intolerant. Sociable, sociable. An and in negate. In Sanskrit, a negates. So we would have an Atman. Atman means soul, and an means not soul. It doesn't mean you have no soul. It means that your soul, your being, is not defined by the material world, as I've said a couple of times. 90% of Buddhist denominations, schools as they're often called, but denominations, believe this. There is one that does not believe that we have a being, a self. It's called the Pugdalavada. It's a branch of Theravada, original Theravada Buddhism, which they believe that there is not self. But let's not worry about that, because the overwhelming Buddhist teaching, I'm in the Caribbean, near the jungle, and this is why that is a bit of sweat, because I'm near the jungle in the Caribbean. I apologize. So, Anatman. Buddhism believes that there is a self, because the self can be reincarnated, and the self can be transformed into a Buddha. A Buddha can transcend the idea of space and time, but a Buddha, you can become a Buddha. A Buddha transcends our conception of a life and a death. You transcend the idea of the life and the death, because you're free from the cycles of born and being reborn. You're not born, you're unborn. There is no more being born. You transcend the physical body and you become an awoken Buddha. Another question, point, is that Buddhists say, well, is there a God? Is there anything beyond this? Well, I'll be very brief, but there are three main schools of Buddhism today, three types of Buddhism today. I'm sure you may know these already, which are divided into Mahayana, Hinayana, which is sometimes called Theravada, incorrectly, and then there is Vajrayana. Okay, the three schools. When you hear of Tibetan Buddhism, that's a Vajrayana school. When you hear of Nepalese Buddhism, that's a blend of Mahayana and Vajrayana. When you hear of the Buddhism of, say, China and Japan, South Korea, that's called a pure Mahayana Buddhism. But in Nepal, it's a mixture. And when you go down to those Sri Lanka, and you go to Vietnam and Cambodia and Laos and Thailand, you're looking at what's called Hinayana Buddhism. So Buddhism has three main branches. Each branch is looking for its own individual way to finding the combination, the secret, to turn off, to free you. It's offering you a solution to be free, to become enlightened, to become awoken. Mahayana, Hinayana revolves more around the teachings of the central teachings about phenomenal existence, material things, how problems arise and come and go. It's called Abhidharma. They're very much interested in looking at letting go of problems in meditation, about mindfulness and letting things go and come, and that transcendent being. And they're also interested in the Buddhist teachings of the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. Mahayana looks at bigger ideas such as the Prajna Paramitas, the idea of transcending space and time. It looks at luminous emptiness. It looks very much about the lotus, the blossoming lotus, Amitabha teachings of Amitabha, the transcendent Buddha lands. And Mahayana also looks at Dharmakaya and the idea of the Dhyani transcendent Buddhas, for the Panchen Buddhas, the transcendent Buddha families, the womb of the center of the universe as being a womb, and you waken up and this illumination in the womb of cosmic womb. Mahayana includes, and Mahayana also does include, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, and Abhidharma, looking at phenomenal existence. But so Mahayana includes many more ideas about, and great ideas about how to awaken and become enlightened and become a Buddha, become awoken, how to become happier. And lastly, Vajrayana, which is centered around Tibetan Buddhism mainly, and also Nepal, to do with, they have a lot of mantras like speaking mutterings. They use a lot of ritual. You know, this is a Tibetan bell which I bought when I lived in Nepal. So they use very much sound, they use incense, they use illumination, mantras, talking, muttering, asanas, bodily positions, mudras, hand positions. Maybe I could do a few. Time is running out, but they have the Ajani mudra, the Dhyani mudra, the Bhumispasi mudra, the Abhaya mudra, the Gatha, the central Gaba mudra, which is like a mixture of that. So that's to do with transcendent prajna and the Hina Gaba of just type in transcendent or Buddha families. And very briefly, I have just one last thing I can say, is that the Mahayana business, they have what's called Buddha Pure Lands, and the idea of there is main Buddhas, transcendent Buddha families. So you'll have Sukhavati is the name of the Pure Land of Amitabha. Then Vajradhara has its own Pure Land. Ashopya has its own Pure Land. Amoksiddhi has its own Pure Land. And Vairocana have their own Buddha. So in Mahayana, they also have this idea of transcendent Buddha families, Buddha paradises, which exist beyond where we are. I hope I've taught you something. There are several more